Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution. I selected doing a series based loosely in part on Paul Perini's book, The Laws of Love. I decided to offer this as a focal point and starting point for the new year many months ago. Little did I know we would be where we are and how very, very fitting these messages are. We're in the third week. The very first week was about oneness. Last week's was about the idea of equality. And today I want to talk to you about compassion and community. Compassion and community. Fitting, as I said, not only because tomorrow we are celebrating Martin Luther King Jr.'s work, his life, his message, what he stood for, but in light of where we are, quite frankly, as Americans. Compassion and community says that all people matter. All people matter. Compassion and community says that our common needs, our common aspirations, our common experiences far outweigh our individual differences. Compassion and community says that it is our similarities that allow us to work together in this journey called life. And to the degree that we work together well, to that degree, life flourishes for all of us. And to the degree that we fail to learn how to be together and work together, all of it crumbles. Whether we're talking about in the small unit of a family, or the unit of a spiritual community, or a city, or a state, or a country, or our world. It falls apart in each of those units, regardless of the size, if we do not learn the value of working together and the value of working together and staying connected even when it is difficult to do so, especially when it is difficult to do so. For you see, when we feel connected to others, cooperation is natural and easy. When I have a sense of who you are, even if I don't agree with you, when you are a real person to me and I have a sense of who you are, I am much more likely to try to find a way to understand and to cooperate so that we both can benefit from whatever it is we're working toward or whatever it is we're trying to find our way through. What is important to remember is that where we learn these very basic building blocks of compassion and community, compassion and relationship, is in our very first relationship unit, and that is our family. Family is where we feel connection or we don't. Family is where we have learned to experience a sense of belonging or we experienced rejection. It is where we feel loved and approved of or criticized and rejected. And while no family is perfect because we are not perfect people. It is also true that some are more problematic and some are much more dysfunctional than others. Acceptance from our families, when we grow up in an environment that is predominantly loving and affirming and accepting and authentic, then we grow up with a greater sense of trusting others, trusting in the goodness of others, and a willingness to work through our differences. But if we've grown up in a family unit where we experience rejection and criticism and disapproval and perhaps even abuse and trauma, we tend to emerge out of that wounded. And if we have not dealt with those wounds, we tend to act those wounds out all around us unconsciously. Whatever our family experience was, it still lives in us today as something that either is a platform for our excellence or is something that we are working to understand and working to heal. Those whose family experience was abusive or traumatic tend to leave home wounded and angry. Wounded and angry. A friend and colleague of mine, a Science of Mind minister, Reverend Kathy Hearn, I once heard her say, sometimes we tend to do our growing up all over each other, as if we are getting sick all over each other, if we have not done our own inner work, our own inner growth. And, if we think about it, for those who have not had the experience of being in a family or a community of love and acceptance, because the human need to belong is so real and so strong, we will go looking for it, sometimes in places and organizations that are harmful to us and to others. The need for belonging is so real. As we are nearing a year of being in varying degrees of sheltering in place and isolation, I think all of us, even those of us who tend to be very resilient and very emotionally strong, are coming to a deeper personal felt experience of what it is like to not be in community with each other. It is in community, healthy community, that we thrive. It is in healthy community that we grow. It is in healthy community that we can bring out the best in each other. And it is in unhealthy community, it is in dysfunctional community that we can bring out the very worst in each other. In his book, The Laws of Love, as Farini writes about this idea of compassion and community, he suggests that groups and communities are no different from families. Here's the way he words it. Communities and groups are no different from families. They are in many respects substitute families. And all of the abuse patterns you find in dysfunctional families, you'll find in any kind of social, political, or religious club or grouping. When human beings gather together in groups, they express the collective worthiness or unworthiness of their members. Think about that for a moment. When human beings gather together in groups, they express the collective worthiness or unworthiness of their members. The higher the sense of worthiness among members, the greater the capacity of the group to love, to support, and to serve others. This is in part to me why spiritual community that is built upon the ideas of the innate goodness, the divine potential in each and every person, that communities that are based and grounded in that understanding and that fundamental spiritual truth are the kinds of communities that need to be front and center in times of crisis, in times of conflict, in times of challenge, to help bring the energy of compassion, to help stay connected with the other when we don't understand the other. Because it is only in being able to stay connected when it's difficult to do so that we can build a bridge of understanding that can lead to a cooperative path of solution. And we need that. We need that. The spiritual practice of compassion is built on this key idea. The spiritual practice of compassion is built on this key idea. My highest good and your highest good are woven together. My highest good and your highest good are woven together. And that's the essence of community. I don't live in isolation, and neither do you. Even if we are living alone in our apartments, in our homes during COVID, we're still not living in isolation. I depend upon others that I will never meet for my very basic needs in life, and so do you. We are woven together. We are woven together. My good is not separate from yours. In metaphysics, we use the expression no private good. And we use it to basically say that what is really good for me, what is healthy for me, what is right for me, what is good for me, cannot be, in the end, something that is bad for you. That is bad for you. You know, we can look at it in very real terms right now of this idea that my highest good and your highest good are woven together, even on the most basic of physical levels. The wearing of our masks during this time of the rampant spread of this virus. Is it comfortable to wear a mask? Is it pleasant to? No, I don't know of anybody who says, boy, I really enjoy wearing my mask. And it's hard when we are communicating to be able to hear more clearly. I've come to appreciate just how much, without knowing it, I rely on the expressions in people's mouths, their smile, or even kind of reading their lips to be sure I'm understanding what they're saying. But I also know that my wearing a mask, your wearing a mask, is a way that we are not only protecting each other and respecting each other, but beneath it, it is the realization that we are woven together, that how I live my life, what I do or what I don't do, does impact you, and vice versa. You see, a true seeker of spiritual understanding, somebody who's really committed to living their life from the highest spiritual truths and understanding. In some ways, they may never walk into a temple or a mosque or a church or any formal place that we would call a faith structure, because there is a difference between religion and spirituality. I'm talking about spirituality here. The true spiritual student is always asking, what is for the highest good of all? Always asking, what is for the highest good of all? And you know, you don't even always have to have the answer. Sometimes you don't have the answer. But the true spiritual student is always living in and from that question. What is for the highest good of all? What is for the highest good of those who are on the opposite end of the political spectrum from me? What is for the highest good of the strongest among us and for the weakest among us, for the richest among us and the poorest among us? What is for the highest good for all? And even though we may not have the answer to that question, the mere willingness to live in that question and keep it uppermost in our minds will in some way point us toward the answer, because the answer lies in how we do this together, in how we do it together. Pointing again to some words from Paul Ferrini, they're very fitting. He writes, all people deserve to have their inalienable needs met. A compassionate society supports people in achieving physical, emotional, and mental well-being. By doing so, it invests in its people and helps them to self-actualize. Only self-actualized people can give back to the society that nurtures them. Only those who have been fed understand how to feed others. Service to others cannot be performed by an unempowered person. Only those who are empowered can empower others. Only those who are loved can love others. Our goal in serving should not be to do something for others that they should be doing for themselves. That just strips them of their dignity. So what does real compassion look like? What does it do? Real compassion doesn't try to feed you. It tries to teach you and help you to feed yourself. It's willing to look at what are the barriers to your ability to do that And who erected those barriers? Are there laws that need to change? Are there systems that need to change? But let's figure out how to help each other get to where we need to be. True compassion doesn't just support you, it teaches you how to support yourself. It teaches you how to support yourself. True compassion is not about giving people what they do not have as much as it is about showing people what they already have and teaching them or supporting them to using it. But it also means understanding what might be the obstacles that are in their way and never coming from a place of superiority thinking that we necessarily have the other person's answers. We need to listen first to understand how is it that you are where you are in a place of lack or need, not blaming or faulting, but trying to understand. And then helping to remove any barriers, helping to teach, helping to support. Because as they say, there but for the grace of God go I. There will be a time in my life that things are not working right for me, that I'm not understanding, that I don't have the answers for myself. But somebody else does, and somebody else can help me find mine. Real compassion that builds true community also recognizes some important things. Real compassion that builds true community recognizes not only that we are all in this together and that my good and your good are intertwined. So real compassion that builds community recognizes that. But it also recognizes, as I've been pointing to a moment ago, that we have not all started from the same starting line. That we have not all started from the same starting line. If my racial literacy work over the last 3 to 4 years has taught me anything, it has taught me the truth of that. We have not all started from the same starting point. Some of us have had many more roadblocks and obstacles just because of the color of our skin than others have had. And true compassion that can build a beloved community, which Martin Luther King Jr. stood for, the beloved community. True compassion that can build that seeks to understand what those starting point differences are or were, and to work together to change them. Whether it means dismantling certain systems, throwing some of the old systems out and finding new and better ones, but the willingness to do the actual work. We all belong to one fundamental unit. We all belong to the human family. It is our highest level of affinity. You may identify as male or female, as trans, as black, as white, as straight, as gay, as Asian, as I'm sure I'm leaving many other possible descriptors out. And each of those identifications is a piece of us, a part of us, but it is not the all of us. And the highest affinity that we share is that we all belong to this thing called the human family. And a lot of it is suffering and hurting right now. And for those of us who are not experiencing as much suffering or as much pain, I think we have a moral obligation to say, how do we work together and help solve this? And sometimes in the work of solving something, we have to open our eyes and we have to be willing to see things that can be hard to see, that can be heartbreaking to see. I remember my one and only experience, my time in India, and the things that I saw I could never unsee, and the things that I witnessed and experienced I couldn't and don't want to ever forget, because they've forged in me a compassion that wouldn't have been there in the same way had I not seen things that were so hard to see. But close to home, we have to be willing to look. And I say this so much with my unity friends and science of mind friends and new thought friends and metaphysicians in mind, because we tend to only want to see the positive. We tend to only want to see the good. And that, in times like this, is to our detriment. We have to see both. We have to see both. We can't be afraid of looking at what isn't working and figure out how to make it work. You see, one of the most important things is that we have forgotten that we belong to each other. We have forgotten that we belong to each other. And we have to start living and remembering that. We have to start remembering that we belong to each other and that we belong to something greater than just ourselves. We belong to something greater than just ourselves. We belong to each other. We belong to this human family. And this, to me, is where spiritual practice and spiritual community is so very important. Because as we do our work together, it is also how we heal together. We don't really heal alone. We heal together in community. When I think of the amazing work done around the ending of apartheid in South Africa and the deep, deep, very real work that was done through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it was healing that was made possible because it was done together. And it was messy before it was whole. It was messy before it was healed. We have much that we can learn together, but we have to be willing not only to keep our eyes open, but to keep our hearts open and to keep our hands ready to do what we can do. As I said in the beginning, when we look out at the issues in our world today, they can seem so daunting, and we can easily think, who am I to make any sort of significant difference? All we need to do are the simple things of being decent and honest and loving and kind, learning to talk in a way that others will listen, and learning to listen in a way that others will talk. That takes living from compassion, and that is what's necessary to build community, and I believe is certainly a significant part of what is necessary to build the kind of community that Martin Luther King Jr. talked about, the beloved community. Namaste.